this question because you're going to have to envision yourself in the future. So the question is, 10 years from now, when we find ourselves in a world where the presence of clean and healthy water is rebounding, what would we say we did right to get there? What choices will we have made? What creative actions did we take to enable us to protect water for future generations? Who would we have connected with? So again, the question is, 10 years from now, when we find ourselves in a world where the presence of clean and healthy water is rebounding, what would we say we did right to get us there? What choices will we have made? What creative actions did we take to enable us to protect water for future generations? Who would we have connected with?
So in 10 years, so I'm going to be 42 at the end of this month. I was born in 77, and so I do carry a lot of the past history with me. Like in 1978, the Religious Freedom Act came to be. So I think of like my grandparents and the struggles they overcame, and I didn't get to meet my grandparents physically on this earth. They passed away a year before I was born. And so in 10 years from now, being 52, I have 4 children, and I would hope that my children, and I already see glimpses and hints of what potential my children have in carrying us forward and changing the narrative and being fearless, not being afraid to stand up against the big monsters that all of us are up against in trying to have clean water and protect our communities, to be safer. And so what I see and envision in 10 years is really what we also touched on this at our table of reclaiming and remembering, tapping into our ancestral memory. So I see that happening, more, and a lot of what I want to say is really repetitive of what's already been said. Really getting back to who we are as a people, really fully learning our language, because we're told that if our language is lost, then our nation no longer exists. So I think really hanging on to that and really fully embracing how to be a good relative, how to live in a better way. And again, just really echoing what my colleagues here on the panel said, and how we can find ways of living a better life for everyone. One of my good friends used to always say this in public health, we have to fight for a good life. We have to fight against, lateral violence and oppression. We have to fight to live a healthier life, eat healthier, nutritionally, physically, really the whole well-being of ourselves, in being a good relative to others and to the land. And if we don't have any of that, or if one piece of us is out of balance, it's like a ball. A ball is very circular and whole, and if you roll that ball across the table, it rolls, or a court or a floor, it rolls pretty smoothly. But if you have a piece of that ball that is like bulging, or like if you leave a basketball outside in the winter, or sometimes it gets a bulge in there. If you try to roll that, it won't go to its destination. But it's not to say you always have to take a straight path to your destination either. It's okay to have those bulges and to regroup and find ways to heal yourself, and healing our communities. So I really, pretty much echoing what's already been set up here, is getting to the root cause of our issues and trying to find solutions, and focusing and promoting that healing within our communities is really going to pull us forward. So it's nothing we haven't heard before, but I truly believe in it. So thank you.
So water is the first medicine, and food is their second. And I think everybody here has said it and feels it in there's been this shift, there was this awakening. Some of the people have always been connected to that, and some may have been born into that, and then maybe lost their way a little bit and are coming back to it. But collectively, I see there is this shift, and it's a revolution of the mind. It's changing and questioning what's been normalized, the way we live, the way we treat each other, our priorities of what we eat, where we're growing our food, how we're growing our food, how we're living, looking at the sustainable living. One of the conversations we had is questioning modern sanitation systems, the fact that North Americans are using clean water for their septic systems is very privileged. So questioning those types of things and looking at how indigenous perspective and knowledge had it right. And it actually doesn't have to be that expensive. It can be just small shifts and just treating each other really well, like relatives, that your success, that, you know, when you look at your child and have that love and commitment to them, a long time ago we had that for each other. And so their success, and you were very tied into that. And so if we started to look at each other as those true relatives of how we used to treat each other, because our nation depends on that, our sovereignty and our self-sufficiency. We are only as strong as our weakest, most vulnerable people. And right now, there is a shift, and they're stating there is not going to be enough natural resources to sustain the population here. And so it will be a time of the survival of the fittest. And so looking at how fit are we to survive, and that's mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We need to go back to how we were, and I see that happening, and then taking that forward of making sure that we have representation. We're representing ourselves, our worldview, in areas that, with policy. I want to thank the Clean Water Alliance and Dakota Rural Action, you know, Lillian Jargon and Rebecca Turk. They work with 2 nonprofits, and they're our allies, and they've brought some really amazing legislation forth. And those types of things is putting with legislation. So the community, legislation, and then understanding that as North American Indigenous people, we can impact Indigenous people's plights around the world. So just staying committed to that and supporting each other.
In 10 years, as we look back, I would hope that what we can say that we did right is that we remained prayerful and true to our cultures and spirituality in this work, but also that we acted without fear. That's one of the teachings that we at Thunder Valley received when we first started our organization, is to always come from a place of hope and not from a place of fear. And I think that in looking back 10 years down the road, 25 years, when we look back on this summit and many to come from this day, I hope that we can say that we stayed prayerful and connected to who we are as Indigenous people, but most importantly, that we acted without fear and that we always remained hopeful. And sometimes that means the courage to take those bold actions that are needed. You know, as Oglala people, we come from a long line of revolutionaries and patriots, warriors, a warrior society. And sometimes those types of actions have to be done. And you know, my father being who he was, there's a place for everyone in this fight, in this battle that we're in. And I would just pray that we have the courage in those times that we need. So that's one thing. And the others would be that we would have made some significant progress in transforming our communities, that we've made some significant headway in creating those culture shifts that we're talking about, in liberating ourselves from the state of dependency, the state of constant culture of poverty that we exist in, where it's always about survival, that we can transition to communities of, you know, that are thriving. I hope in 10 years we would have made significant strides in that. Because only then will our people be empowered to see 7 generations down the road. Only then will our young people feel empowered to galvanize themselves and take action and form coalitions and be grassroots, is when you're not having to worry about how you're paying your light bill in the same month as your rent payment, right? When we're able to be forward thinking because we have that economic independence and self-sufficiency as people and as nations. Also, I would hope that in 10 years we can look back and say that we've been successful in disrupting that status quo around leadership, whether it's in our tribal communities or indigenous communities, that we really transformed who our leadership, what our leadership looks like, that it fits our people and our traditional ways of governance, that it's not so imposed, right, from the outside in, but that we've really taken steps to transform those so that it meets the needs of our people. And then also the leadership at these state and federal levels, that we have more folks like Ruth and Red Dawn in positions that they're making decisions, right? It's not enough just to be consulted anymore by governments. We want to be the decision makers. And so that we're really supporting those folks that's their fight, right? That's their, I ran for office too, so I'm not completely out of that conversation, but I think that flipping the script and how leadership is, especially for Indigenous representation, is important in the next 10 years. And then hopefully in the next 10 years we would have created renewable energy systems in our communities, whether that was our solar mini grid systems with the best technology and innovation, or water reclamation practices in our community so that we're reusing and recycling water in our area so it's not so wasteful. I would hope that in the next 10 years we would have made those transformations as well.
I want to add a couple things. I just want to say, just to talk about Wopila, thank you so much, because I see elders here and people that I grew up, activists, that I learned to not only have that internal strength, but that it's for our people. We needed to fight for our people, and they're sitting here. And I also acknowledge Tanya Stans and her son, Zehan Stans, and he's like 14 years old, and he presented legislation, and he also testified at the Capitol. So if it wasn't for our grassroots people, and I know that Julie's here and really is supporting and representing, and so when she talks about that leadership of understanding, it's not just one leader. We never had just one leader. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, they have the narratives, but we had a collective, strong, huge warrior society supporting them. And that's what it's going to take. And that's one of the things I'm so privileged that's what I feel I have. I have people like these two women sitting next to me, and she reached out when I first said I was going to run, and I had so many people reach out because it wasn't me running. It was we were having a voice at that table. We're not quite at the table, but we're in the building, and so we're still working to get at the table. But then the allies and the representation, and I know that Tanya Stans, I wish she was here today, but her son is here, and he is amazing, and in 10 years, I know that he probably will either be running for something, or teaching, or doing something on a scale that I will be so proud that I've crossed his path. But everybody that's here, it's not so much that one leader, it's collectively we can move this forward.
I just started developing a question on the spot in my head from the responses, because I heard a lot about youth. I believe that's a question that would be good to ask, because we're always thinking in the future, particularly 10 years. Why 10 years is because this is Niki Wakan, World Indigenous Peoples Decade of Water Summit. When we announced this Decade of Water Summit in 2016, that was a decade-long commitment we were making to the Indigenous world and to our brothers and sisters who we hope to convene and bring together, tap into that collective wisdom and intelligence. For us, we always ask questions, particularly the young people in Niki Wakan are always going on with long, rich, and powerful conversations with one another here. We're always looking and saying, what succession plans are in place for our communities. And I hear a lot of the challenges they face, that a lot of their budgets in some of their communities, respective communities even around the world, do not reflect the youth. But then we look ahead, we want to move to something affirmative, something positive. What can we do then to come together in the future? How might we succeed this next generation to those positions of leadership? Because too often we hear our youth are the leaders of tomorrow, but they should be really promoted as leaders of today, not tomorrow. And for us, we always look forward to speaking with our elders, because this really is intergenerational water summit. It's intergenerational community we're developing here with intergenerational goals, activities, and actions. And we're in it for the long haul. But your response has really inspired me to think about that. The question I have right now is, what opportunities and work do you think would make all the difference for developing youth leadership for our communities and nations? Again, what opportunities of work do you think would make all the difference in developing youth leadership for our communities and nations?
So my background is in youth leadership development. I did work a year in my earlier days in Minneapolis at the Division of Indian Work in their youth leadership development program as a youth worker. But we did a lot of outreach and really tying our cultural values into the curriculum, into the tutoring, into everything that we did. And then I spent some time with my tribe, 4 summers running our summer youth employment program, where it really grew from a 6-week program to like a 12-week program. It was really popular. But we also saw that we had a captured audience, and we wanted to figure out how we could help our youth within that 12-week period. But I'm also a product of like the Indians into Medicine summer program, and that's actually where I met Tanya Stans. So have that lens or that worldview from my past experiences. But as a mom today, I would say even just bringing our youth, our kids, our children with us when we go to meetings and to different things when we go to work, to bring them with us, I think that is a really powerful way for them to just see what their parents are doing, you know, when we say we're away at meetings, but also just for them to be fully engaged and immersed in those environments. Throughout this path too that I'm on currently, my kids have really shaped my path, and even just from speeches or speaking at rallies. There was one time, I'll mention a quick story, and a couple years ago when the women's marches were really taken off across the country, and we were on our way to the march, and I asked my kids, well, what do you think I should say? And my son, both of them, my son and daughter, I have a 16-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old son, and 2 they're not toddlers anymore, 2 5-year-old twins that just turned, a boy and a girl that just turned 5, July 23rd. But my son, who's 12, he really pushed me to say the lyrics of this one song that they like, and it's, so yeah, I basically just said the lyrics to the song that they really liked. And so examples like that, I think my kids really, and the same 12-year-old son, just a couple nights ago, we were talking about the presidential elections coming up, and he was saying, well, you know, Mom, if Trump gets in, you know, then if he gets reelected, then after this, then he won't ever be president ever again. And so it was like, yeah, that's true, but you know, then there was other parts to that conversation. But so really just listening to our youth and taking them with us, and really lifting their voices. And to that end, I really believe that those, you know, closest to the pain, whichever age generation, their stories and their voices need to be front and center, always. So I think those are my thoughts to that. I don't want to continue to ramble.
No, I completely agree. One of the things, when you see children that are born, you'll have your first child and they're watching the milestones, and then you'll have your second, and that second child's competing with the oldest child, and then you'll see the development. And then if you have that third child, all of a sudden this third child comes in and just sees the older children and doesn't, doesn't adhere to milestones or anything like that, just sees what those other children are doing, and you see that advancement and that empowerment of that little child who just all of a sudden is trying to do everything that their older child does. And I think, you know, one of the things that she said about her children were a big part of it, I witnessed that, I saw that, and one of the women that I just love and respect and is so strong and powerful is Alex Romero, and what she's done, I see the way she raises her children and empowering them and teaching them how to ranch and to farm. And it's not when they get older or, you know, there's this child responsibility. It's we're a family, we're a collective unit, and we all work really, really hard. And so there isn't this, when the time comes, you will be doing this, it's we're doing it now, and they're empowering their children. And so continue to give those opportunities and looking at ways she talked about work for youth development, and that's so fundamental because I think a lot of us, if we look and think of when we started working, it probably was at age 13, but there are a lot of kids who may not have that opportunity, but they're to have like a regular formalized job, but there are ways to get them working, be entrepreneurs, and just create something without limitations. And so not limiting them as children, but just empowering them